That term was used to describe a mask that was either made out of paper mache or wood that was put on the players that played in the theaters in Greece. There were people sometimes 200 feet away, and in order to hear them, they couldn't do it without these masks because they had holes in them and little megaphones coming out the front that projected their voices. They were act like amplifiers and voice projectors. And they worked quite well, and those masks, which were the fictional characters that the play was comprised of, were called personas. So that's where the word persona has developed today, because if you're a persona, you're an actor, and an actor is not alive, he's a fictional character. And it's coinciding with the way they form your name. When I say they, there are people that own, actually, men and women, that actually own the registries that comprise the corporations known as the municipalities, or the provinces, or the countries, all being separate corporations, along with the various courts, all being separate corporations that are formed under the creditor who owns all of these subsidiary corporations. And this is all financial law.
So where does the creditor get their power from?
Submission. Good question, but it's by submission. The creditor gains his power because, like, the Bible's been put up for the honor to make it all look good in the bait and switch program, and for the confidence, as the confidence man who needs to gain confidence of his victim. The Bible is put up there to do that, and that's how the banker has come to own the corporation known as Canada, the corporation known as British Columbia, etc. These corporations were set up as false god, dead thing control mechanisms by the international banksters. Oh, I said it again, bankers, who wish to have people submit themselves to them for loans and financial contracts that were not with flesh and blood men and women, but with dead fictional corporate entities. And many of you out there having driver's licenses are invited to pull them out. And you will see, to your surprise, that your name does not appear on those driver's licenses. You'll see a rendition of your name, but not the name your mother named you and the way you were taught to write it in school. You'll see a backwards version with your last name written in all capital letters, and your first parts of your name will be written in upper lowercase, but as the last part. So they reverse your name and they capitalize it, which is a corporation, a corporate rendition of your name, and then they get you, the flesh and blood, the volunteer, as the surety for all the debts of that fictitious corporation that they've created, that is subject to all the fictitious laws of the other corporation called the province, the municipality, or the country. These corporations, again, registered and owned with the international entities known as the International World Monetary Fund, or the World Bank, that are owned by private men and women families, the Rothschilds, the Lobes, the Schiffs, the Waxmans, many other names that are actually quite relevant. These are just men and women like you and I. They have as their goal, their belief system, to enslave all men and women of the world that don't happen to follow their belief system. Their belief system being very old and ancient, coming from on the stone, Moses' time, and of course a lot of other writings that some of their ancient guys decided to add. Quite interesting, because in the Bible, the first 5 books, it says, don't add to my law, don't take away from my law. Moses' book, actually, the book of Deuteronomy, says, don't add to my law, don't take away from my law. Deuteronomy 4:2. So that's still part of the scripture that the Queen defends God's law. That's one of God's laws. So that's really important to focus on, because it goes back to that oath. Don't add to my law, don't take away from my law. Well, if a guy's got a false oath and he happens to be a lawyer and he's working for the government, they pay that guy money to write law. Well, if he's writing law, he's got a false oath. Well, he's writing law to control people, to obtain submission to another regulation so they can make more money off of people. But if he's got a false oath, that means that law, no matter how old it is, when it was written, like 1955, when they wrote the false oath, it's void. And everything that happened as a result of it is void. And if there are any damages or any cost to you, it's all got to be refunded. Everything must be reverted back to the way it was before it started. That's called rescission. So the reason we have the Bible and the Queen, again, is in order to gain people's trust, you must have something as a symbol, like a crown, or the Bible, truth and honor and God's law, to gain people's confidence. And that's what's been done. And now that we've discovered that the first 5 books of the Bible are clearly telling God's people, the Hebrews, the Israelites, today known as the Jewish sect of religious following, were told by God to go and enslave all the men and women of the world that weren't Hebrew, because they were not following God's law and they refused to. So they were to be made possessions of the Hebrew nation forever, and they were to pass those possessions on to their children as an inheritance, so they would be their possession forever. So in following that order, we can understand why we don't have any gold in our bank to back our money. If we had gold in our bank to back our money, you wouldn't see reverse names on our documents. We wouldn't have all these codes, rules, and regulations. Our governments wouldn't be in debt. There's a lot of history as to what happened with the money, but we only have to go back to what Christ told us in the New Testament.
Give to Caesar what is to Caesar?
Oh, that's interesting. Christ told us, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and render unto God that which is God's. So now we got 2 subject matters that he's talking about. Very important focus. Who is Caesar? He was a guy that said, I'm God, and the whole world shall worship me. So we got a guy that's breaking the first commandment. Thou shalt not bow down to false gods. Thou shalt not serve them. So he's saying he's God. Whoa, that's blasphemy. He's really asking for a whack from God. He says all the world shall pay him taxes. So that means anybody that wants to follow God's law certainly can't submit to him. So that's important to know. We got on one side, we got a guy who says he is God. On the other side, we got a guy that is God. And the guy that is God says, don't bow down to false gods. So Christ, his son, comes along and says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Render unto God that which is God's. So we have to carefully discern what is being said there, because there were 2 types of money back then. One he held in his hand, the Roman denarius, with Caesar's picture on it. And he said, whose picture is that? He asked the other guy. And the other guy said, well, Caesar's picture. And he said, therefore, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. In his other hand, he had a shekel. He said, render unto God that which is God's. So now we got something happening here, because he was saying if you're using Caesar's money, well, obviously you're bound to a false god. So I guess you're stuck with that. But if you're rendering unto God,
if you submit to Caesar,
yes,
then you owe to Caesar.
That's right. You've submitted, you've owed, you bound yourself in contract to Caesar. Very astute. This is the capturing. This is the decapitation of your freedom in God's law. Because God's law is written so you can do whatever you want. Don't hurt anybody. But do whatever you want.
But what relevance does the Bible have to do with our current law? Is it this, like, it seems...
The Bible is, again, the bait, so people think that our current law is based on the Bible's law. That every law that we have, be it robbery or murder or rape, or it used to be abortion, or many other laws that you will find in the Bible, are concurrent with man's law, like certainly theft and perjury, false witness. They're consistent with the laws. You'll find all of the 10 Commandments in man's law, in the criminal code.